Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer is here with me now. Mr. Scheer, it's good to have you in studio. I appreciate you making the time. I know that you expressed support for Keystone. I want to get to that in a second, not exactly as the government lays it out, but I actually wanted to start where I left off with Premier Eby, because the other hot topic in this country right now is a pipeline that doesn't just go north-south, but out west from Alberta. He is vehemently opposed. I know that, we can all debate the reasons behind that, but it's a fact right now that he really doesn't want that pipeline to be built. Would a Conservative government kind of try to build it anyway?
Well, that's what happened with TMX. The British Columbia government, the NDP government, didn't support TMX, but we have a constitution in Canada that empowers the federal government to make these kinds of decisions to the benefit of all Canadians. The Conservative Party has been proudly championing a pipeline that would open up Asian markets. Right now, Canada sells at a discount to the United States. The U.S. economy is basically subsidized by the Canadian energy sector, and we believe a great way to change that is to get a pipeline to the western shores that open up markets like India and Korea and Japan.
The point that Premier Eby was making, though, is an interesting one around the tanker ban, which effectively kills any kind of pipeline to the northwest coast, but that the variety of deals he's been able to make with the private sector and Indigenous groups to generate more LNG development has been predicated on the existence of that tanker ban. So would a Conservative government run roughshod over that, for example? Like, are you willing to sacrifice LNG for oil?
I believe it was Christy Clark, former British Columbia Premier, it might have been even on this show, that pointed out—
I was away that day, but yeah.
Okay, well she pointed out it's really just a ban on Canadian shipping. That the law the Liberals put in place really just prevents Canadian energy from getting to other markets. American shipping goes up and down the coast. I believe she said every day. So
not in the same proximity.
Well,
there is a difference.
It's still in the area that the current Liberal law bans. So I mean, look, we believe that it's essential to get off the dependency on the U.S. market. Right now, we are beholden to the U.S. To a huge degree, especially when it comes to energy. So we absolutely believe that you can build a pipeline at the highest environmental standards with all the structural integrity and making sure you don't affect aquifers and things like that, with proper Indigenous consultation, as there was with Northern Gateway, where dozens of First Nations communities signed on to partnership agreements with the proposal. We also point out that it used to be in Canada that you didn't need tax dollars to build a pipeline. That used to be done by investors, but all that investment money is leaving. TC Energy, it used to be called TransCanada. They've dropped the Canada part of their name because they can't get anything built in this country. Just announced $8.5 billion worth of energy projects in the U.S. We believe those dollars should be being invested in Canada, and we're completely puzzled, not just puzzled, we're gobsmacked at Mark Carney's promise to Donald Trump that he would send $1 trillion of investment from Canada to the United States as part of some deal that they're working on. So we don't believe Canada needs to invest more dollars in the U.S. We believe Canada needs to invest, Canadian investors should be investing in Canada, putting Canadians to work, building Canadian factories, Canadian sawmills, things like that.
But even for example, when you use the example of Northern Gateway, like, even though a tanker ban didn't exist, ultimately Indigenous consultation was done. It was deemed to be not stringent enough, not adequate enough by a court. And even the way in which Cabinet made the decision was also part of what the court ultimately decided was not enough. So let's say, the Conservatives are in power, the tanker ban is removed. Is it really fair to say that these pipelines are all of a sudden going to get built? They simply didn't under Prime Minister Harper.
They did. There are 4 major pipeline projects, including to Tidewater. And what happened with the consultation piece was there's a very specific ruling by the judge about a very specific way the consultations were laid out, with a bit of a roadmap of how to do that. And rather than go back and do it properly, Justin Trudeau effectively vetoed that pipeline. And remember, Mark Carney was asked specifically when he was at committee, did he agree with Justin Trudeau's decision to kill the Northern Gateway project? And Mark Carney said yes. Mark Carney wrote a book called Values, where he complained that the carbon tax wasn't high enough, where he agreed, he advised Justin Trudeau when Justin Trudeau was phasing out the energy sector. So clearly Mark Carney's not going to get those big projects done. He hasn't included any talk of a pipeline in his so-called major projects list that hasn't actually even come into existence, still going from one bureaucracy to another. So what we're saying today is, look, let's get rid of the shipping ban. Let's let Canadian energy workers sell their products to Asian markets. Let's get a better return on what we are selling, so we're not just selling into the U.S. market. Let's let provinces like B.C. and Alberta and Saskatchewan collect more revenues. Let's let the federal government collect more revenues so we can improve services for Canadians. All Canadians benefit when Canada exports more of its energy. I never understand why radical politicians like David Eby are opposed to it, or Mark Carney for that matter.
Well, look, I understand the economic pitch, but I also understand there's nuances among the opposition, for example, along the coast of British Columbia, where they are very worried about the potential impact of exporting more oil from the coast. There are also First Nations who are supportive of a pipeline endeavor like that. But to say that it's that getting rid of the tanker ban, getting rid of the emissions cap is all of a sudden going to create a world in which the way you convey it is like, it's so simple. We could just build all this stuff. The fact is, you built some stuff under Prime Minister Harper. The major one was the Line 9 reversal. But I lived through that. I covered it living in Alberta. There was a ton of opposition. Even Keystone, approved under Harper. Why couldn't it get built? Because of opposition at the state level. Farmers in Nebraska, for example, who succeeded in court. So the idea that it's like these things that Trudeau did that made it untenable to develop the economy from a resource perspective, like, it's not substantiated by the facts.
But it actually is, Vashi. We had over 150, since the energy sector developed, we've had private sector proponents build pipelines in this country. I mean, I live in Regina, I can see where an Enbridge pipeline cuts across the north end of my city. That was all done by investors, Canadian investors, international investors, pouring money into Canada, putting Canadians to work. The shipping ban was a piece of legislation that Justin Trudeau imposed upon Canadians. He didn't have to do that. That was a marked change. The production cap, again, a government policy.
Then
what conservatives
why did oil production
are saying,
continue to rise under Trudeau so significantly, actually at a faster pace than the previous Prime Minister?
Because of the timelines and when he kicked in. But what he has basically said is that, what Justin Trudeau kind of set is that the Canadian energy sector cannot grow. And Mark Carney voted against repealing that production cap. So Mark Carney has said he's happy with that production cap. What conservatives are saying is that the roadblocks to pipelines are actually imposed by government. The shipping ban is a government decision. The production cap is a government decision. The industrial carbon tax, a government decision. These are all things that
these are all First Nations, not a government decision.
No, but let's talk about all those First Nations community who wanted that project.
I agree.
To
I acknowledge
that's where they get the economic benefit from. That's where their quality of life gets to improve. And I absolutely believe that everybody wins when our energy sector is able to thrive. First Nations community, oil and gas workers, provincial governments collecting revenues to improve public services. Like, where's Canada going to get the GDP growth if the U.S. is effectively saying that Mark Carney is not going to get a deal on things like auto, if the U.S. is not dropping softwood lumber tariffs, and then this Liberal government comes along and says, oh yeah, we're also going to keep kneecapping our energy sector like Justin Trudeau is doing, where are we going to make up for these U.S. tariffs? Where is this growth going to come from? How are we going to get young Canadians back to work? Have you seen the job numbers for young Canadians in this country? The energy sector is a great avenue for young people to get good-paying jobs that allow them to start their lives.
The energy sector isn't on the decline. The energy sector under the previous Prime Minister grew on a monthly basis at twice the rate of Prime Minister Harper. I understand that the prospect of it getting way better is out there.
I will take you all over Saskatchewan and Alberta.
It's not contracting.
Sorry, I got to challenge you this. I will take you all over Saskatchewan and Alberta, and I will introduce you to people who lost their jobs. I'll show you people whose companies have gone bankrupt, and they had to watch American companies buy Canadian equipment at auction for pennies on the dollar. Okay, so you could find some stats that say that because of price changes, it might be better this month than last month, but there has been a real blow to the Canadian energy sector, and a lot of young people that would come out of high school, come out of the trades and say, okay, I'm going to go work in the energy sector. I'm going to go help drill. I'm going to get into, engineering and things like that. Those jobs have in many areas completely dried up. So these pipelines are not just an avenue to fill provincial coffers for healthcare and education. They're also a place where young people can get work again. And what we're questioning the government is, why not? What is this allergy to developing our energy sector? And why do Canadians have to pay the price? Why do those hardworking young Canadians have to pay the price for Mark Carney's radical ideology?
Do you have evidence, though, that this government thus far, and I take your point about his book and the positions he's espoused in the past, that thus far they are as anti-energy as you're painting them? The top project on their initial major projects list was LNG Canada Phase 2. And again, I'm not making up those statistics. I take your point about.
Excuse me, making it up. I'm saying,
no, but that's from
I can
Macdonald
just
Laurier
people.
Institute, and that's not exactly like a left-wing think tank. They did the analysis, and we know oil companies are making money hand over fist.
They're making money by investing in America. TC Energy, $8.5
They've
billion.
switched to gas. They've moved off oil and onto gas.
They are building a pipeline in Virginia. They are. That is $8.5 billion of Canadian investment money that's going to work in the U.S. Those are Americans that are going to get those jobs, American steel workers, American construction workers that are going to do all that. All that money used to be put to work in Canada, and this government's not doing that. And as for evidence, I think it was just last week they voted against our motion to lift the production cap. That's pretty substantial evidence. In the last few weeks in Parliament, just across the street, they voted to keep Justin Trudeau's anti-energy policies.
Just quickly, though, you are also saying that you'll support Keystone if, in fact, that thing that's happening, in these negotiations that we don't really have any clarity on, like the Conservatives would essentially support that.
Well, we approved it back in 2010 under Stephen Harper. Donald Trump approved it in 2017. It was one of his first acts. This should be low-hanging fruit, by the way. Like, this shouldn't be hard. And if Donald Trump wants to buy our energy, he gets a good deal for the American economy. We shouldn't have to offer up anything in negotiations to get Donald Trump what he wants anyway. He's signaling to us that he wants it. He signed it off on it back in 2017. This should be done in a couple of hours if both parties are serious about it.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Mr. Scheer, appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Andrew Scheer is the Conservative House Leader.